Welcome back. We're going to be talking about the CW Nancy Drew season 1. The problem is there's just so much. There's literally just so
Every
much.
single episode is chock full of, you know, little references to other Nancy Drew stories. It's full of,
Yeah.
secrets that you learn about each different person and what's going on with them and what their life is like and what their family has. And every single minute of every single of the 18 episodes is used for a very specific purpose. Um,
Yep.
yeah.
Yes.
Okay. Characters.
Yeah. So I think we do it. We go into the characters. I think we obviously start with Nancy because she is the prominent. Obviously, she's the teenage detective. In this, she started solving mysteries when she was 12 and she had saved a local girl. Obviously, as we talked about, her mom did die from pancreatic cancer, and she died the day that Nancy was crowned Sea Queen. And kind of due to the death and the grieving, that kind of delayed her plans to go to college. Like, it really affected Nancy. And she swore off the crime solving. It definitely caused a lot of strain on her relationship with her dad. And kind of where we come in, we find out like at the beginning of the summer, she had kind of started a no strings attached relationship with Nick, and then obviously she waitresses at the club because everyone works there. So that's kind of like I think the big things of who she is in the show. She definitely, like you were saying, is a mess, but I like that. I think that's more believable. It's more relatable.
She's a disaster.
The only other thing I felt really strongly was like yes, Nancy's mom passed away in the books, but she was really really young in the books, right? So like it's going to affect you, but it's like trauma in a whole different way. And I also feel like in the books we never really see the actual effects, like the lasting effects of losing a parent like that or losing a parent when you're really young, and there's never any like resolution or dealing with that. And so something I really liked about this and this rendition of Nancy was you see it. You see the kind of immediate effects, but then also the long lasting ones. And she is having to work through it, and kind of like how death and grief affects you and affects everything of your life and your relationships. So that was probably one of my favorite things about Nancy. And I feel like it's nice to normalize that grief happens, it affects us all differently. You work through it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Nancy, I think it's really, really interesting how she comes into the story. Because usually with like Nancy Drew games or other movies or books or games,
Books.
whatever, she's always just like, oh, yep, it's another mystery time. But this one, because she's had her hiatus and because she had the trauma and because she had just kind of sworn off it, it's a really interesting dynamic to kind of watch her get into it and kind of have a passion for life again. I think we get to see her kind of
Yeah.
start brightening and start being able to work through things. Also, during the season, we learned that that very first case she solved when she was 12, there was a demon that was part of that who ended up affecting her mind because he affects the minds of children. And so she just like had residual trauma from that she didn't even realize she had that was seriously affecting her from when she was 12. And so just kind of she really felt like she was a normal kind of teenage girl who was running around solving crimes, happy go lucky, popular, not really worried about things other than her mom being sick. And then when her mom's cancer finally came to its conclusion, then Nancy just starts discovering that the world around her isn't a wonderful place. Like every single thing that she discovers is just so much for her to bear. And so it's just, you can see that kind of stacking of grief as every little thing that she had wanted or thought about or thought she knew was all coming crashing down. So we get to kind of experience that with her. There were definitely a lot of frustrations I had where she would just
Wait,
fly
side
off
note
the handle.
before you get into those, because we were talking. I feel like we are talking about the good things. I also think how they approached it seemed a lot more organic and viable. That she would get into a mystery and think, "I want to solve this," because I would too. Put in this situation, I'd be like, "What the heck is going on?" Like, I want to figure it out too. And so I also really appreciate that, because sometimes you're like, how would you even get in this mystery? Why would you even be doing this? And so I felt this like it was more true to life, which I really appreciated.
I was laughing to myself because I really feel the showrunners for this show have very similar mindsets to the showrunners of Euphoria, where they want their characters to make the worst possible decision and then see what happens. Not for the other character, just Nancy. Just Nancy is always reacting in the most either dramatic or taking things the worst way possible, or she's always just going at things without thinking about any other sides of any issues, and just is fully like, oh, you did this thing, you're dead to me. And it's,
I think that's the trauma though. Like, I think it's because of all of the trauma, and clearly we already saw one episode where she had unresolved residual trauma for something we didn't even like. We're like, what? Like, what more does she have? And I felt like I related to that a lot, and I really liked her. And I think that was also I'm very protective of this Nancy. I'm so defensive. I hated how all of her friends always seemed to like turn on her and like get so upset. I know you're not going to feel this, but I feel this because I've been Nancy. I felt that where like you're just not quite processing thing right, and you're just trying to do the right thing. And I feel like Ned was always like attacking her and so suspicious of her, and like, Nancy, you've clearly turned away from us, and like she hasn't. Anyways, I'll wait till we go through more people. Wait, before you say anything, let me at least defend myself to some extent, because I feel like you're gonna come at me, which is totally fine. I'm not gonna say Nancy is not sometimes super aggressive, super abrasive, super blunt, and is a little. She's a little too narrow-minded. So, not narrow-minded. She's a little too focused. I will agree. She gets very like hard focus and just like can't always see past some of it. But I feel like her intentions are always for the right thing and to try and do the right thing. And I feel like a lot of her friends just totally don't even, like, they just ignore it and they just get angry. It's just so much teenage angst for me. I just like, I get so annoyed and I'm like, leave Nancy alone, okay? She's trying to shoulder the world over here. Do you think it's easy? It's not easy.
okay.
I'm sorry.
I have so many thoughts right now. Okay. Yes. So, for starters, I think every actor in the cast is doing a phenomenal job.
Oh, yes.
Everyone is
sure.
absolutely doing the best with the characters that they are given. And everyone is genuine and believable and warm. And it's so much fun to watch. So I'll start with that. Yeah, so I have, yes. So everyone in the cast is doing an amazing job. Nancy, yes, I understand that she wants to solve this mystery, and this is the only thing kind of like keeping her alive and thriving. So like, I absolutely understand that like this is her only priority because she is clinging to this mystery. She is also being haunted.
Yeah, yeah.
So I understand that she's got both of these strong pieces where she's just like, yep, it's a mystery, gotta go solve it. Um, and everyone else is like, it was ruled an accident. We are trying to live our own lives.
Mm-hmm.
Why are you pushing this? And it's easy to see their perspective as well, because, you know, George is trying to be like, okay, well, I'm trying to keep my family afloat by keeping the restaurant going and staying out of jail. And Bess is like, I'm just here so I can find out that I'm a Marvin. That's all that I want to do. Why is Nancy pushing this and then um, pushing us away when we're trying to help her, but also requiring us to be involved at other points where we don't necessarily need to be? I thought that was a really interesting part of Nancy's character where half the time she'd be like, no, I have to do this by myself. And then the group is like, well, the ritual literally needs 6 people to do this. So you physically can't, Nancy. So we will be involved. And then other points where she's just like, I think we all need to go off and do this thing together. And they're like, we're trying to live our actual lives. I'm glad that your dad is a wealthy lawyer and you don't have to worry about like day to day living things. But like, we need to be able to focus on this.
My response to that would be is a lot of it, especially the initial where she's like, I'm alone. I think that is more of like that's how she solved puzzles or mysteries originally, was alone, but also because like you were saying, they were like, we've got other stuff to do, why are you focusing on it? And I think that's why she would push them away, because they weren't necessarily committing, like they wanted to do it, but then they're also like they don't want to do it. So I can understand her be like, I can't deal with all of this, I'm just gonna push you away. Not saying that's the right thing, but I can see why she would do that.
But even in the
Yes.
pilot, where she takes the necklace to George and she's like, you know what this is. And George and Bess help her figure out how to open Tiffany's locket. And then Nancy is just like, okay, well, I'm off. Bye, guys. And they're like, well, we want to come too. Like, we're helping you with this. And she's like,
Right.
no, I work alone. And that part. And then later, whenever they were trying to be like, okay, well, we actually have jobs and stuff. And she's just like, no, 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 I need people with me. So
Well, but that's what I'm
she's
saying
sending
though,
out
is
so
like,
many mixed messages.
but they are too, though, because they'll say they want to be involved, but then they're like, we don't want to be involved. And
Yeah.
like, they'll doubt her and they'll be like this and this and this. So I get why she's sending the mixed signals. I don't think she needs to, but I get why she does, like, why she has the push and pull, because they're also push and pulling back. And I think she's afraid to rely on people because of her mom. And so she's like, well, do I rely on you guys? Like, what am I supposed to do? Like, I feel like it's a mutual thing because they're also like, we want to be involved with it, but we also have to do all these other things.
Mm-hmm. They can't focus 100% of their time and energy on it. And
Yeah,
she is
especially
such an
George.
all or nothing person that anytime anyone pulls back in the slightest or in any way shows her that they're not in 100%, she's just
Mm-hmm.
like, okay, then I have no time for you. Which,
I think Nick kind of furthered that though too, because like I feel like she had started to finally be ready to be all in on their relationship, and like she was trying really hard for him because he kept wanting more, and then suddenly he was like, yeah, I gotta go. And she was like, okay, I'm gonna suck it all. Like she was starting ready to
well,
bloom, and then she's like, nope.
because she didn't tell him that. She
Why?
didn't show him that she was ready. He had been trying for so long and she had been pushing away for so long and then has like one conversation with her dad and then it's just like, you know what? I'm going to change. But they don't have a chance to really have that conversation necessarily. And also, he had probably been trying for a long time to try to be like, hi, can we do this? And she had not been down for it for so long that he finally was like, okay,
Well, I
this
don't
is
think it
clearly not
was.
working.
I don't think it was that long because they started to like at the beginning of the summers when they started dating, and they originally like it wasn't dating. Like they were just
Mm-hmm.
having a thing,
Mm-hmm.
and he didn't seem to actually be starting to go for something more serious until we started the season. Because in episode 1 you see them, he like starts to finally try and have that kind of conversation,
Mm-hmm.
but also I feel like there's trying and then there's demanding things to be done on your timetable. And that was my
Mm-hmm.
frustration with Nick was when he wanted Nancy to, it was literally everything had to be at his timetable when he thought it needed to be done. And that's what shut her up more. There was no like, okay, I want to talk about this. When do you think you could talk about it? When do you think you could be ready to talk about it? It was, well, I'm pissed. You have to talk about it right now, or
Hmm.
I'm just,
Yeah.
it's nothing.
I think he might have felt that if he didn't push her, she was never going to do it. So I fully just don't think that they were compatible and that he clearly wanted a relationship and wanted somebody who could spend a fair amount of time with him. And there's nothing wrong with that. And Nancy wasn't at that point yet. And so I think it was just bad timing for them. And
I
that's
agree. I
nobody's
agree. I'm
fault,
not
but
really upset about
ultimately,
it.
yeah.
I was just upset how he handled things.
Hmm.
And like I said, I feel like he was hypocritical in the ways that he would treat Nancy and then how he treated George and how he would work things out with George versus like I don't feel like he ever gave Nancy that patience.
Hmm. Well, I think we saw George, we saw it much faster with George.
Yes. And I think it also wouldn't bother me as much if he didn't keep like when he gets mad at Nancy or like when things happen when he gets frustrated while they're solving and doing stuff, he'll do like low blows. Like he will say things that go back to their relationship and just like I don't know. I think that's why I kept getting frustrated. I just get really frustrated with him and how he treats her.
Oh, that's so funny because I really didn't. That's the opposite direction that I was getting. I mean, again, I just don't think they were compatible, but
Well,
I,
no, I don't want them back together.
yeah,
It's just like,
I felt that she was
yeah,
just so unavailable
yeah,
that he was resentful and didn't handle that
yeah,
properly and ended up coming to the conclusion, rightfully, that, hey, this is not a good relationship for me
yeah,
because she's not meeting my needs and it's making me frustrated and this needs to end. And unfortunately, that was right around the time Nancy decided, kind of quietly by herself, that she was there. So, yeah.
yeah. Well, I think that just is my frustration is how he went about it. I'm not
Hmm.
blaming him. I'm not against that. They broke up. Like, no, I don't think they're compatible. I think it is better. It's just more of how he handles things, how he does things, and how, yeah,
I think we can be biased on that because we're privy to Nancy's thoughts and to Nancy's inner, like, I really like him, but I'm concerned about all of these other things. Like there's so much going inside her that she won't communicate. And so from his perspective, I feel like he could very easily see all of these walls, and then every once in a while she'll be like super warm and affectionate, and he'll be like, oh my gosh, so it is there. So I want more of that. And then she just
yeah,
closes that door right up again. And so he's
yeah.
just continually like just running into it, because he doesn't know, what her true feelings are, and
Yeah.
everything that's going on with her, because she just won't tell him.
Um, we didn't really talk about why he did the hard time, and I feel like
Mm-hmm.
that's kind of a key part of his character.
Yeah.
So he was on a football team, and they were all at a bar, and his friend, that was a girl. I think they were kind of like a thing, but not a thing. Like they had
Yeah.
whatever. Regardless, his friend was there. One of his like kind of seemingly arch nemesis football dudes was like being super handsy with her and like was not taking no for an answer, and he tried to defend her, and I think punches started to get thrown, and he unintentionally pushed him out of a window, and the guy ended up dying. Tiffany came in on the tail end of it, and yeah, and so he ended up being convicted of manslaughter. Um, and then the other thing we kind of touched on is he's a mechanic. He worked for Lucy's brother, and then eventually throughout the season he becomes the co-owner of the Claw with George. And I think when he became the co-owner, I think his character started to see a lot of growth, and he
Mm-hmm.
started to shape up a little bit, and he was more tolerable for me. I can't. I really. This show was so hard for me. I can't handle teenage angst and like some of the things teenagers do and go through and the thought process. I'm like, I
Hmm.
just don't get it. But he got better, and he. I was nice. I still just call him Nick. I don't think of him as Ned because he's not really what I would picture Ned to be. I would
Hmm.
say I did like that they tried to give Ned more personality, like when they were thinking about making a Ned, because I think Ned definitely gets just absolutely blue balled and everything. Like he has no personality, and I feel like it's always hard for a lot of people to like him. And like I like him, but I also have what I think Ned should be and what would make sense for me. So I just think of him as Nick because I really don't think he's Ned, and it's not because he's
Hmm.
not with Nancy. I just don't feel like that's what Ned would be. But I did like him as a character. I like what he added to the group, what he added to the story. Um, I did. I did really appreciate him. I think it was for the best that he does end up with George. I think him and
I was
George
so excited. I
are good
saw it,
for each
yeah.
other.
I saw it happening so early on, and I was like, oh, yes. Oh, yes. And so then that's how I was like, all right, so Owen and Nancy are going to get together, because I knew they were going to break Nancy and Ned off so that he
Yeah.
could go be with George. I knew that Ned was not going to, they were not going to have George and Ned cheat on
No,
Nancy.
yeah,
And
definitely
so
not.
I knew that there had to be a breakup coming in there. So I was very pumped for that, because I was, yes, tired of the Nancy Ned drama. I was just like, all right, let's go find love for these people.
Yes. Yes. Also, kind of a side note, because I read when I was writing for George Fan as well, was if you haven't seen it, if you haven't seen the trailers for it, Ned is of African American descent. I did like how diverse they made it. Obviously, Nancy and Beth. Nancy's Caucasian. Bess is Caucasian. She's from Britain. Not saying you're from Brit. If you're British, you're Caucasian, but they both are aces. But then you have George, who's of Asian descent. I think Chinese, but I'm
Mm-hmm.
not 100% sure, so I really don't want to
The
misspeak.
character is Chinese, yeah.
Yeah, I think so. And I liked that. I liked that we had the diversity, and I liked that they actually started bringing in the different cultural aspects
Yes.
of it too. Like it wasn't just like we have different colored skins. We actually have like different cultures
Mm-hmm.
coming
Yeah, we
in.
did spirit. We
So
did dealing with spirits from a Chinese perspective. We had dealing with spirits from a Native American perspective. Yeah, there's a lot going
yeah,
on there, which was really fun.
yes, yes, yeah. So speaking of George, she So, like, her kind of defining thing in the beginning as we first meet her is she's Nancy's nemesis from high school. Girls were making fun of George, saying she was a sleut, and
She had a
Nancy didn't.
reputation for hooking up with older men.
Yeah, she had a reputation, and Nancy never said anything about that. However, she also never spoke up for George, and from my understanding, her and George had been kind of friends before that, and like even so, speak up for someone. Don't just let that stuff happen.
Yeah.
And then kind of the other thing about her too in the beginning was obviously she was involved with Ryan Hudson, but so what I liked about this George, which I think is kind of George in general, she's a very hard worker. She's very goal oriented. Obviously, kind of from what we talk about, you can tell she's the breadwinner for the family. She's very protective of her sisters, and then she is the manager of the Claw. Um, I felt like this was fitting for George. I was upset that Bess and George weren't related at first. That made me really upset. I was like, man, we're going so far off of canon.
Mm-hmm.
And then I was like, it grew on me. If I stopped thinking it so much as it had to be Nancy Drew, it didn't bother me as much. And so I liked that they weren't. Because then we did get more diversity because they weren't. And
Yeah.
I felt like I felt like they all got a lot more personality than they've had in the past.
Definitely. Definitely. We did a lot more adventuring in their personal lives than at least I've seen adaptations go before, because it's usually, solving a mystery an episode. But now we are solving basically 2 mysteries with some little like 1 episode mysteries thrown in there. But again, because they utilize all of the time in their hour-long, 45-minute long episodes, we really get an understanding of their personalities and all their different relationships and how everyone intertwines and what's all going with this. So.
Yes. Did you like George? Were you a fan of George?
I liked George. Yeah, I thought I liked her mom's character as well.
Yes.
I thought it was a really fun way to show. I mean, it's a hard life being the breadwinner for the family. And oh my gosh,
and basically being the mom of your sisters and your mom.
Because her mom's an alcoholic, and it absolutely just broke my heart when near the end, when Bess was just like, oh my gosh, yeah, dealing with all of those spirits. I mean, no wonder she drinks, because she feels so alone. And then George has that moment where she realizes or gets a better understanding of her mom and like why her mom is the way she is, instead of just kind of being resentful of how she is. So I thought that was really impactful. I thought it was.
I love seeing that growth too.
Yeah, and I thought it was an interesting thing at the end because they have George confront the mob dude, Ryan, because he's 40 years old or whatever, and he was hooking up with a high school student, and the show hadn't really addressed that all that much. That she was underage and a high school student for most of their relationship. Like, it had been touched on, but it hadn't been super directly addressed. And so George basically realizes that she has left over just
trauma,
damage, so much emotional damage from that relationship, where she was the other, I can't call her a woman because she was a child, and so she just basically does this whole monologue at Ryan, just being like, here's how you hurt me. This is how you messed me up. You're a bad person, basically. And I just thought it was, because at that point we know that Ryan is Nancy's dad. Did we talk about that? We talked about how Lucy's the mom.
I think we said Ryan was the dad.
Okay. Because that was a big reveal. I mean, I guess it was kind of like associated with Lucy, that Lucy was pregnant with Ryan's baby, which means Ryan is Nancy's dad. And so Nancy has
Yeah.
this whole um, major distress over now she has two dads, and she find Carson and Kate are her adoptive parents, and that's just a whole thing. Um, anyway, so we have discovered, that Ryan is Nancy's real dad, and then that means George was hooking up with Nancy's
Nancy's
dad, which is a separate thing. But yeah, so it's really interesting because the show starts to kind of be like, oh, we're humanizing Ryan. He's in love with Lucy. He's Nancy's dad and is going to actually try to put in the effort to be a good dad. And then in the finale, I think it's maybe the second to last episode or the last episode, I don't remember. But in one of those, right at the point where we're starting to humanize him and feel a little bit better about him, then George comes in and is just like, hey, here is why you are a terrible person, and then leaves him. And I think that's the last scene that we have in him in season 1. I don't remember. It's the last one
Yeah.
I remember him in. And so it's just a really interesting end piece for his character arc in season 1. It's very important for George's so that she
Yeah.
can kind of confront some of those demons before telling Nick, like, hey, this is what's going on with me. I want you to know about it so that I can work through it and so that we can be happy together. Because otherwise, there's going to be stuff between us that you don't understand. Yeah. So it was important for George, but it was a weird ending for me for where Ryan ended the season. Because there's no really redeemable piece about that.
Right. That part is also like also weird, and like it's so hard to remember they are high schoolers. Like I really feel like we're at the end of college with how old they look and how old they
Yeah.
act. It's always so weird to
They're
remember that
19-year-olds?
they're
Okay.
kids. Yeah, I forgot about that.
Mm-hmm.
He's such a child too. I always forget how old he has to be because he literally acts like he's still a high schooler,
He must be
playboy.
36 or 37 because he was
Yeah.
18 and then Nancy was born and then we're 18, 19 years later. So he's like
Yeah.
37-ish.
Yes.
Hooking up with a 17-year-old. Okay.
I'm so I was so excited for Bess. I remember freaking out when I started to see her have so much more personality. So she is introduced to us as this rich city girl with a mysterious past, and then it really turns out she was actually just raised in a terrible part of England, wanting to get out of it and find her long lost relatives. She does live in a van, but she does end up staying with Nancy. Um, Not even just a short while. I think there's a couple times where she ends up back
Mm-hmm.
there for different reasons. I love this for her. Like, don't steal things, kids. But I love for her that she's a kleptomaniac. Like, I love that.
Yeah.
And we also got the more diversity, and we've got a character in the LGBTQ plus. Um, she never really says what she is. I guess, I would just without her
She
specific.
she kind of alludes to it. She and
Right.
Ace have this platonic anchor relationship, which is very cute because he's hitting on her for a while and then sees her um, kind
With
of get
Elizabeth.
together with Lisbeth and it's just like, all right, that's chill. We're platonic, but we're still besties, or we're still kind of an anchor in each other's lives. So they call each other their platanker and just
Mm-hmm.
maintain that friendship the entire season, which is very cute. Um, but yeah, when she's talking to him, because he's trying to say, hey, what's happening with Lisbeth? Are you guys going to go out? And she spends a while talking about how she doesn't really date anybody because she's got these secrets and yeah, so she can't really open up to anyone. That is every single character has so many secrets that they cannot
True.
share with anyone else. Yeah, so that piece is really interesting.
Yes. But that's what I mean is like she alludes to it, but she never specifically says anything
Mm-hmm.
about her sexuality. And
Mm-hmm.
there are several sexualities where she could be with both men and women. So I will
Yeah.
just go with I think she's supposed to be bi. I think that's
Yeah.
the intention because she has had past boyfriends and
Right.
I think yeah, so I think that's what we'll go with. But they're definitely pushing more of her with females and I like that. And I think that not saying sexuality adds depth to your character, but the what they did with it and how they used it, I think added depth to the character that she'd never had before. She also very firmly believes in the supernatural and is even though she believes, she's so easily freaked out by it and like gets all like, oh my gosh. And then yeah, obviously she's a waitress at the claw like Nancy.
Yeah. I also really liked that she is just so girly, which from
Yes.
the books and the games, George is always the tomboy who's, you know, strong and tough. And then Bess is, you know, the pretty girl who likes shopping and just likes girly girl things. And so they very much kept
Yes.
them in those kind of little silos, but then added, yeah, so much depth and breadth to the characters, which was fun.
Yes. Yes. And I love that you still stay true to kind of the original parameters of the character, but then you added all these different little nuances and details and unique things that flushed out the character and gave them more. Because I feel like a lot of the times these characters definitely uh, fell victim to side character syndrome and they just were not given the love I think they deserved because it is more than just about Nancy as much as we love Nancy. And like you need good I don't even want to call them supporting characters because they're also main characters, but you need, good supporting characters to have a good story. So I think she was probably my favorite of the translations from the originals to like this interpretation.
Mm-hmm.
She was definitely my favorite, and I think she got the much needed love and work she did, and she turned out really well. I just love the dynamics that she brings to the group.
Yeah, I love Bess.
And I would have been so upset if they did not keep all the girly thirstiness of Bess. Like I love that for her.
Yeah.
Maybe it's like stereotypical and all of that, but I always loved that for her. That was like something I always appreciated about Bess.
Mm-hmm.
All right, then we have your favorite Ace. I don't know where I found this from, but this felt like the amiable burnout was like his character description. Oh,
But he's not anywhere. Ugh.
that was just I think that was his descriptor on Wiki, and I thought that was so funny. So I I put that just because I was, yeah. But I think the key things is so he's a self-taught hacker, which is what ended up getting him in trouble in the past. And then because of that, that caused him to have a relationship with the police chief. And he was, feeding the police information to, try and keep out of getting in trouble and stuff. He was son of a former police officer and state cop. I this one I was unsure about. Is he the cook or the busboy for the Claw, or both?
I think he's both. They
I
sometimes
think
show
he's both.
other actors, in the kitchen, and I'm like, what?
I think
What do you mean
primarily
they're
though,
other
and the
employees?
right.
Because he was definitely cooking. I think he's the cook because
Yeah,
he was cooking dinner during the murder.
that's true. That's true. I
So
think initially when they didn't have other people, he was the cook and the busboy. Nancy, best waitresses. George is the manager and does whatever else as needed. Yeah.
and see, this isn't so. He's the son of a former police officer, and his dad was the one who was involved in the case that eventually got the poison. So
Right.
Ace knew about the poison, and this is another. I can keep talking about the suspicious circumstances where Ace. I'm convinced he was involved or was somehow included because he was one of the people. And yes, we find out it was Karen who like took the poison and gave it and whatever because she was involved with the case. Also on the police side, don't know. But the fact
Yeah.
that Ace was connected to that case where it got the poison and he was the one who made the food and blah blah blah. Anyway, I was like, okay, I have all the evidence I need. Thank you.
I loved Ace. I loved him. I felt like he was a good counterpart, male counterpart to Nancy.
Mm-hmm.
Um, like he was all for the mystery and helping to solve and doing stuff, and I liked seeing him. I think he was a lot. I don't think he's a loner, but I think he was definitely an outsider,
Mm-hmm.
especially maybe for a lot of his life. And to see him finally find a place where he belongs and kind of find a
Yeah.
family and find himself,
Yeah.
I love that for him, and I loved his undying trust in Nancy. That Nancy is Nancy. She knows she'll figure it out. Like when he drank the poison because he knew Nancy could not be because obviously Nancy could not be wrong. Obviously it was water. I was like, my man.
Ace the golden retriever.
he yeah. Yeah. I feel like he has a little more intelligence though than that and a little more autonomy. But
Clearly, half the time, no, but the other half the time, he's just like, oh yeah, I put up cameras in the library. Oh yeah, I put key, what's that called? What key trackers on all of the library computers. This is
yes.
what I'm saying. Like, they're like, oh, how would we know what Tiffany did? And he's just like, oh, well, my mom worked at the library, so 5 years ago, I did this, this, and this, setting up security at the library. What? What? Are you kidding me? You set up keyboard trackers for all of the computers in the library? Why?
I
Lazy
definitely
writing.
know a person.
Lazy writing. That's all I'm going to say there.
I can agree with lazy writing, but I've also definitely known people like him and people who would do those things.
Every
Because,
computer
like,
in the library?
well, I mean, if you're going to do
For
one, you
what
might as well
purpose?
do all of them to see what people are doing. Curiosity. But yes, it to some extent, yes, was
Lazy,
definitely
lazy
probably some
writing.
lazy writing. I still loved him.
And I was thoroughly convinced that the crash between Tiffany's sister and Ace, I was convinced he caused the crash. I was
Really?
convinced he was working for the Hudsons and he caused the crash to take her out. And that's why he was being like, well, I don't really like her, but I am going to spend a lot of time with her. I was convinced he had ulterior motives on that. And so I was just like, okay, well, she's going to end up dead and he's going to survive the crash because he caused the crash. It
I
was
don't think
very
he.
wrong, but that's what I was convinced. I
I
was
don't
so
think he
suspicious of him.
disliked her. I think he just kind of like. I feel like within himself, he probably knew they weren't compatible, but also
Oh,
like
totally.
he still kind of loved. Well, I don't know if loved. I don't know if they were quite there, but he definitely really liked her and had a lot of feelings for her.
Yeah.
She was something.
She was so fun. I was so excited when she came on. I was like, ooh, the chaos queen herself.
Yes.
Tiffany's sister shows up, I think, in episode 2, ends up really just throwing the whole case around because everyone was like, oh, the case is solved. It was an accident or it was
I
natural
think it was like
causes.
three.
And she just
Yeah.
kept being like, literally, no.
Her playing the freaking 911 call at the funeral was like
Insane.
some other characters talking about. So obviously Carson Drew, he's an original. So I thought we should talk about him. He had a strained relationship with Nancy after the passing of her mother, and like he's throughout the season you see he's trying to figure out how to reconnect with Nancy.
Mm-hmm.
And then kind of his other really noble thing was he was tangled with the Hudson family. He got out of it, I think, because of Nancy's mom, and Nancy's mom saying like, we got, cut this and all that. And then obviously him taking Nancy as his child, and then he ends up
Well,
getting retangled with
that's
them.
the whole reason that they left.
Yeah.
Like, he stopped working at the Hudson to keep Nancy away from them.
Yes, but prior to that, Kate had also been being like, we need to start getting away from this. Like, this isn't cool, good. Uh, but yeah, he then gets retangled with them because he needs the money to help Nancy for like the bail and other stuff.
Nancy went to jail because Nancy broke into the morgue to steal blood of Tiffany. Yeah, that's how she ends up in jail, right?
Yep. Yes. And I thought, I don't know if true to character, but I thought he was good. I think he was a good dad for Nancy. He felt like Carson Drew.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe a little softer than what I imagined Carson Drew to be.
Mm.
I I don't know how to explain it. Not that he was soft, but like, I don't know.
Well, Carson in the books feels just so detached. And I think it's similar with, the other characters, which have smaller roles and are,
Yeah.
Just like, oh, nice boyfriend,
Right.
pretty shopping girl, lawyer dad. It's just very
Yeah.
kind of stock images. And so in the books, at least, he and Nancy have a pretty formal relationship, where she's just like, hi, Dad. Hannah and I made dinner or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And she's like, let's talk about the case that I'm working on. He's just like, okay. Like, it's a very just
Right.
almost like 50s TV relationship where it's,
Yep.
basically two colleagues who happen to be related.
Yes.
But
I was thinking, or I guess I compared him more to the Carson in the games because I like Carson in the games better than the book because he's friendlier and warmer and what I would want my dad. More of what I would want. Not that I want to change my dad, but like if I were to have a dad. You know what? Anyways, I like him better in the games versus the books.
Okay.
I'm not wording what I'm trying to say. So I guess that's more of what I think Carson Drew would be, is the game Carson Drew, and I guess that's kind of what I was comparing.
Yeah.
But I liked him. I think they did great. I love the actor they chose for
Yes,
him.
he was very fun. If you
He was
haven't
a
seen him in
stud.
anything else, he also plays a slimy lawyer in, oh gosh, what was that show called? It was a cringy detective show from Perception. It's called Perception. It was a show in probably 2008 or so, and it was a detective show where the main guy who was kind of the crime solver, but he wasn't associated with the police. He worked with the police, and he had schizophrenia, and that was the whole thing about the show, is that he has visions basically, or talks to the people who were murdered, and it's basically his psyche planning things out. And Rachel Lee Cook is the main police detective in that, and her ex-husband, who is a slimy lawyer, is Carson Drew, and he's very good, and it's very fun.
I loved that show, but I totally did not remember Carson Drew being.
As soon as he popped up, I was like, oh, look who it is. Playing another lawyer.
He looks so much younger in that, in the hair. Oh, wow. I can't believe I didn't. Wow. Shooketh. Yes.
Yeah,
Yeah.
this cast is
Yes.
great. 10 out of 10 for casting.
Yes. They all, like, I look at them and I'm like, you are definitely your character. Like, I feel it. I feel it in my soul.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know how much or if we really want to talk about these, but I guess kind of the most important of the side characters is obviously Ryan Hudson and his family. I think we could maybe talk a little more about them. And Tiffany was his wife, and then I think we kind of covered pretty
Yeah.
much everything of Detective Karen. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I guess if we want to talk more about the Hudson family, your thoughts on them, your feelings.
Yeah. I really liked the Celia phone call and that we got to really see that Celia is kind of pulling a lot of the strings. Like the husband is doing a lot of kind of the business stuff, but when it comes to kind of mafia shenanigans, she's pulling the strings on that. And I really liked how they portrayed that.
I don't agree.
Okay. Explain.
No, I'm just trying to. I don't want to. I can't do
Oh, you
spoilers.
can't tell me. Okay. That's fine. We're going to also talk about season 2 later. So
I'm just trying to remember what we see of her in season one.
we see her doing the phone call for the hit on Carson.
I think I can agree. I think I thought what you thought
Hmm. Okay.
in season one. She seemed like she was definitely more in charge than initially how it seemed.
Yeah. So season 1, we find out about her affair. We find out that she is starting rumors about Lucy to try to get her to leave town to stop that relationship so that basically Lucy will leave. No one will believe her and think that if she says anything about the affair that she's lying to try to get back at them. So we
Right,
see her motivation so clearly, um,
right.
and get little images of her being like, "Oh, Ryan, just give me this thing and it will all be okay." And then he doesn't. So we just kind of see that mask of rage and whatnot come over her face. And so we know that she's a bad person. So she was a very viable um, candidate,
Killer.
especially
Yeah.
because there was female hair on the crown and we didn't know whose hair that was. And so they brought her in to be another woman whose hair it could be, even though I think a lot of us had suspicions that it was Kate's hair a lot of the time.
One, she's definitely more at the forefront in season one. Like, you see her and are confronted more by her and her nature than you are Everett.
Yeah.
And,
Well,
like,
we
she,
I
yeah.
think we find out that they've heard about the affair. Um, like the affair gets revealed at the near the end of season 1, and so then it's yeah. So then
Wait, which
I'm
affair?
sure her power kind of leaves at that point.
Do you mean the affair about her and Sebastian?
Yeah,
Oh, he definitely already knew about that. That was
right.
definitely not new news to him.
But Ryan didn't know.
Oh, yes.
So that was, and then Everett goes to jail. He gets arrested
Right. Right.
for fraud or something, and then it's yeah. Anyway,
Oh, I thought you were saying the dynamic might have changed because Everett found out about Celia's.
no, I think just it wasn't a secret. It was made public, and therefore, you know, that dynamic is going to naturally change once everyone knows. I don't know what, and it kind of removes her once she's not a suspect anymore. It's kind of like, all right, whatever.
No, I can't say anything. I'll wait for season two. It'll be interesting to see your thoughts on season two. I like that you gave her so much power, though. Like, I love that for her.
Mm-hmm. I was looking for everyone. I was suspicious of everyone. And again, I watched all 18 episodes over the course of 3 days. So I really was able to kind of find a lot of patterns that,
Right.
again, I wouldn't necessarily have noticed or looked at if I was
When
looking
it's
at a week by
extended.
week basis. But because I was watching them back to back, and I was like, okay, we did this 2 episodes ago. We're doing this again. Maybe that's important. Or maybe it's just a red herring because they gave us a lot of red herrings. Or just like
That is true.
um, side mysteries and secrets that ultimately, didn't
Yeah.
affect or had nothing to do with Tiffany's death or
I
Lucy's.
definitely thought she would still have been the one who somehow had to do with Lucy's death.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
I
I
really,
definitely,
yeah,
yeah,
that also for me feels like lazy writing personally. That it was just like, oh, well, actually, her death was actually a mistake. But luckily, she was looking into all of these things, haunted by, like, she was so involved in the mystery and then just happened to be killed by mistake. I don't know. I just think that there's a more interesting way they could have done that.
yes, yes. Okay, I do have questions I think we should quick answer before, so I guess
Okay.
we'll try to be concise. Um, so I don't know if you noticed this or saw this, but they kind of tried to, it seems like, include parts of cases from the books, like little bits and parts, like the hidden staircase is like the easiest one to remember. Um,
Hidden
I,
Staircase, Secret of the Old Clock. They brought Hannah Gruen
yep,
in, which was really, really fun.
yeah. So I really liked that. Um, I guess I kind of was like, what did you think about it? Do you wish they did more, less?
Lilac
I
Inn.
personally liked it. I liked the connection to the books. I like seeing some of that being brought in that way.
I loved that. I loved
Yeah.
that they were bringing in, even if the mystery wasn't in any way similar, the fact that they would
Right.
reference the
Yes.
Golden Pavilion, or, it was just all of these little Easter eggs, which was fun. Another thing that I thought was truly hilarious was product placement.
Yeah.
Um,
Yes.
there
Me and
was
my dad talked about
a
that.
lot of FaceTiming that happened partway through the season because they used to
Yeah.
just do phone calls, and then partway through the season, every single episode, they were FaceTiming somebody. Somebody was not around, so they were FaceTiming Nancy, and it was like, okay. And there were a collection of Yelp references. Um,
Yep.
there were
Wasn't there
uh,
Reddit references too?
Yeah, there were. I listed a whole bunch of references like Message in the Hollow Oak,
Yep.
the Golden Pavilion, Larkspur Lane was a reference, Pine Hill.
Yep.
Um, yeah, I just kept writing another FaceTime reference, another FaceTime reference.
I I loved those. It kind of reminded me.
Things were in the
Yeah.
cloud, and so that was referenced several times as well. And Airbnb was referenced as well in episode 17. So yeah, there were some product placement pieces in there that I thought were hilarious. But yeah, Apple
The
clearly was putting some serious money into it, which I guess, thank you. It was a good show.
True. No, I liked the connection to the books though. It felt like, how you look for the actual literal Easter egg in the Nancy Drew
Mm,
games. It felt like those. Like we were getting an Easter egg. So
yeah.
yeah, I agree. Another kind of, I feel like, important thought is, how did you feel about the paranormal and how much there was and like that? Because I initially, like, when I think about it as a Nancy Drew, it kind of disappoints me. It makes me sad. I loved that Nancy Drew was always the borderline question, especially the games. Is it supernatural or is it really just humans being weird? However, if I don't think of it as a Nancy Drew and just its own thing, I really loved it because I love the paranormal, I love the supernatural,
Yeah.
and I thought they did a good job, and it was really interesting in the mythology and stuff. And so, like, I get very
I
torn.
I like I mostly liked that it was a human who did the murders.
Right. Yes.
Well, yes, two murders. I'm including
Yes.
Owen, not Lucy, obviously. So I liked
But also
that.
kind of Lucy because the town, kind of
Right.
drove her. But yes, yes.
Yeah. So I liked that, I guess. As soon as because for a while I did think it was Nancy. I did think it was at least partially in Nancy's head. And so
Yeah, yes, same.
I fully was like, okay, this is her trauma. And then when Lucy started appearing to other people, and then other people got involved in the paranormal, and I was like, okay, no, this is like either a town-wide mania or a gas leak or something's going on. Still might be a gas leak. Still, jury's out on that one. But yeah, I thought it added something fun to the show, something that kind of made it stand out a little bit more, because there are so many detective shows nowadays that I didn't know how Nancy Drew was going to be like, all right, we are something different if we're set
Right.
in this day and age. So I think kind of going kind of the Stranger Things route makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, I agree. I agree. So we did touch on this a bit, but I like. How would you say Nancy's detective style in this compared to kind of how they have her be like in the games and how they have her be in the original books?
Yeah. Well, in the original books, just like with the show, she is very one track minded, where she
Yeah.
absolutely is just like, great, y'all can do whatever you want to do, but this mystery absolutely comes first to me, and I'm going to solve it. Gosh dang it. And she does it because it's the right thing to do. So, absolutely 100%.
Yep.
I fully agree with what you were talking about earlier, where she was just like, yep, I know you guys are living your life. I have to solve this because a woman is dead and somebody has to figure that out. Somebody has to find out why. And so I did really enjoy that.
Yep.
That she was so driven to do that, and utilized whatever tools she had around her, um, kind of regardless of the impact, to
Yeah.
go and do that. Because again, it was the right thing to do.
Yeah. I feel like the games it's a little bit harder to compare it to because you are kind of the one who's controlling Nancy. But yeah, I agree with what you're saying from the show to the book. I feel like they did a really good job of translating Nancy from the books to this, but then like we were saying about the other characters, giving her the nuances, the details, the backstory, the
Mm-hmm.
stuff to really flush her out and make her real
Yeah.
and relatable beyond just like an idol and like as a child something you want to look up to, but something you can actually relate to and be like,
Mm-hmm.
she is human. She does make mistakes, but she, makes up for it and this and that. And yeah.
Yeah. She felt very real. Uh,
Yes.
she drove me
Every character did.
bananas, but um, I was like, I get why she's doing it. If she would take a half breath before she did some
Right.
things, then things might work out better. But at the same time, I
We
totally
wouldn't have a
understand.
show.
Exactly. A lot of the time, she's making the worst possible decision she can make in the moment, and everything's just running along from there. Like, oh my gosh, when she was so near the end of the show, once she knows that Ryan is her dad,
Mm-hmm.
but he doesn't know that he's her dad, and she's just like, okay, so I need his blood, or I need him to be involved in this ritual because we're family. but he can't know that. And so they're driving in a car, and she is so consumed by the fact that he's her dad and cannot keep this secret that is just bubbling inside her. And so just like starts yelling at him about what a bad person he is when he is
Oh
the
my
only
god, yeah.
person who can do this thing, and she can't tell him why. So the only thing she has to do is be like, it's a favor to me. I need you to do this. Don't ask questions. And just like chill for a moment to do the ritual, and then doesn't have to talk to him probably ever again. I don't know. But instead, she flips out at him, and then he's just like, okay, bye, and just drives off because he's just like, I don't actually need to deal with this. And leaves her alone. And now she's just like, oh my gosh, I screwed up the one chance I got. And she left a locket in the car that leads him to come to his realization that she's his child. So, like, she made the choice in that moment because she was so overwhelmed by everything that was going on inside her that it just erupted out of her at the worst possible moment. And almost completely screwed herself over.
Right. But I feel like that's not like one of the things that makes her real,
Mm-hmm.
though, and why it is so believable
Yeah.
is that because I've definitely been there, like not obviously not in that exact situation, but where you're just so
Mm-hmm.
there's just so much going on in your head. You've got so many things. You're so stressed. You're so anxious.
Yes,
You're
her
like
dead boyfriend and her
the
two
world is
dads. Yes.
crashing, and you just need to get through one thing, and all of a sudden you just can't, and you
Mm-hmm.
snap and like,
Mm-hmm.
yes,
Yeah.
okay. I guess kind of like quick 2 points overall thoughts of the show. Like, would you recommend it? And
I
then
had a
from
great
that,
time.
where do you want to see the show go, and what are your season 2 predictions?
Um, yeah, so the Aglaika is going to be a whole thing. So I don't know if we're going to solve that like in the first episode and then we'll get a new murder mystery, or what's going to happen. I mean, this show just got approved for a fourth season. So there's clearly so much going on in this town. I'm assuming we are still going to be trying to take down the Hudsons, because that is Ned's mission. And Lizbeth is trying to take down the Marvins, who Bess is related to and involved in. And at the very end, we saw that Sebastian Marvin, the one who died, he painted. He was he the one who painted the painting that has
With the Aglaika in the
the
background.
Aglaika in the background. So her
So
family is somewhat involved, and they have kind of determined that the Aglaika was a person who drowned. And so there's kind of, I think that's going to be a murder mystery that they're going to have to be figuring out, you know, who was she and how did she die and how are the Marvins involved. So I think that's going to be a
I'm
piece.
not 100% sure if he was the one who painted it, because the paintings were of there's like the original Hudson and the original Marvin, and I think the painting
Mm.
is of the original Marvin who came over
Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah.
to
Oh, yeah, you're
settle.
right.
And so I don't know, but yes, the Aglaika is
Yeah,
in
so the
there.
Marvins are somewhat involved with the Aglaika. So I think I think basically both of those families, taking down both of those families is going to be the primary work, once the Aglaika, either as part of or once the Aglaika is mollified.
Do you think Nick and George will still be going strong?
Um, I think they will be at the beginning because George just had her breakthrough moment,
Right. Yeah.
yelling at Ryan. I think
Yeah.
they will start strong, and then I think George will realize how much work she needs to do on herself to continue growing. Like, I think she's going to need more time or therapy or something, or Yeah,
like they
I
both
think they're
need
gonna
more
break up
work.
part. Yeah, I mean, everyone in that dang group needs therapy.
That's true. That's true.
At all times. So I think they're gonna start out strong, but I think they are gonna break up.
Okay. I'm trying to think if there's any other like I feel like those are kind of the big things. Yeah. I I really enjoyed it. I had to kind of separate Nancy, but I feel like that a lot of times when I watch adaptations, I
Mm,
have to try and separate enough where I get rid of what my expectations and what I feel like it should be are
yeah.
so that I can just enjoy it for what it is. Because it was good. It was enjoyable. It kind of reminded me a lot of like Riverdale season one
Mm-hmm.
and like all of that. And like I love that. I love the CW. Sometimes they go a little crazy, but I many of their shows I've deeply, deeply loved.
Yeah.
So I,
No, it's
I
fun.
yeah, it was really
I'm
enjoyable.
glad we're watching these.
I know, and I definitely recommend it. And you don't need to be a Nancy Drew fan. You don't need to have read it or know anything about Nancy to appreciate it. And I think that is huge.
Totally.
Um, obviously, I can't really give season two predictions because I know what happens. But I definitely thought what you thought about Nick and George going into season two. I definitely was thinking that, and I was definitely thinking your thoughts of okay, the Aglaika is going to be our next main plot. I mean, obviously, it might not be all of season two because when you have that many episodes, you kind of can have like a half season, half season.
Mm-hmm.
But I definitely thought the Aglaika was like going to be the first few episodes,
Mm-hmm.
and then the rest of the season would maybe be like the repercussions of the things they did. Because like the Aglaika was where it's
Because
like,
we
well,
have that new cop that came in.
yeah, yeah,
Who
and I was
is,
like,
yeah.
we've clearly just like blown open the door of paranormal with and the supernatural with the Aglaika. Like we're gonna be seeing some after effects from all the spiritual messing around we've been doing.
Yeah.
So yeah, I was definitely with you on there. I can't really think of anything else where I was just like, oh, I also was like, season two is definitely gonna start. Like Everett's totally gonna find out Nancy is a Hudson, and I feel like
Mm-hmm.
he will be a main thing of season two and trying to do the like.
So there's going to be some weird drama with Bess, the Marvin, and Nancy, the
Yeah.
Hudson.
Yes, exactly. Yes, and the dynamic that will bring to the friend group. Yes, for sure. All right. If you've covered your thoughts, I think. I mean, there's still so much more that can be talked about because there's so much, but I think we mostly covered it. Thank you, everybody, for listening. We might really appreciate that. Links will be in the description where you can find Sweetie and I. Well, sorry, because she's Sweetie on it and I'm Nenya online. Please follow the podcast Twitter and Instagram. Both are at nosidequests. If you're on YouTube, like, comment, subscribe. All of the interaction is important and gets the videos out there. And everyone else, thank you for the download. Don't hesitate to leave a review or give us any feedback in our DMs, or you can send an email. Hopefully, next episode we'll have time for a tea party. So, if you have anything for us, we'll see you guys next time.
Bye, guys.